If you're currently sitting at grade 5 or 6 in chemistry and aiming to get a grade 8 or 9, then I'm here to tell you that's possible. And the good news is it's not about doing more, it's about doing the right things in the right order. So in this video, I'm going to show you a simple 3-step strategy that you can use to go from a grade 6 to a grade 9 and start using that today. So my name is Sylvia Browne. I'm the lead tutor here at the Impact Academy. And over the years, I've worked with so many students who have felt stuck at a grade 6 and couldn't seem to move beyond that. But every single time it came down to a few simple shifts, and that is what I'm going to walk you through in today's video. Okay, so let's jump right in. So if you're currently sitting at a grade 5 or grade 6, then that means your foundations are mostly there. So what you need right now is targeted improvement. So you need to identify your weaker areas so that you can focus on those areas. So how do you do that? Well, you can use your contents page of your student book. For instance, look through the contents page and try to identify the topics that throw you off. Or a better way is to use a checklist specifically for your curriculum and go through the checklist, identify your weaker topics, and you can put a cross, an X next to the topics that you find difficult, or you can shade them in red. What you're doing here is you're trying to find the topics where you feel that at least 80% of the time you're just not there and you don't really understand those specific topics. Once you've identified these topics, focus on them for the next 2 weeks to a month and then rinse and repeat and then do the same thing over again. What this process does, the goal of this process is that you identify in those 20% of topics that would really help you raise your marks instead of, just revising and relearning the topics that you already know. So it's really focusing on strategic improvement. So this isn't about revising everything. It's about identifying where you're losing marks and fixing those areas first. So that step one, really take some time out to identify the topics you find most challenging. So step one is to identify your weaker topics. Now, once you have identified your weaker areas, you're going to need to know how to plan and schedule when to focus these particular topics, how to plan and schedule them into your timetable, and also how to get the most benefit out of your revision session when you are revising these specific topics. Now, all of that information, I've put them in something called a revision plan template, and I'll put that in the description down below, and you can download that. Okay, so on to step two, that is to amplify your revision skills. So if you know the topic, but you're not revising the topic and you're not revising it effectively, then you're not going to retain the information, which means you're not going to be able to apply it to exam paper questions. So you need to understand, you need to know the topic, have a good understanding of it, revise effectively, that's the second thing. When you revise effectively, thirdly, that would help you to retain the information. And then once you retain the information, fourthly, it puts you in a better stead to be able to answer exam questions, to apply them to exam questions. So how do you revise effectively then? Well, a very simple way to revise effectively that many students overlook is to start with note taking. A lot of students just completely scribble down everything, take notes on absolutely everything instead of honing in on the key information. So I'll give you an example. One of the students that I am working with currently, we are working on properties of ionic compounds, and she was making a lot of notes in the class. And then when I asked her to explain back to me why ionic compounds conduct electricity when molten, she couldn't. Okay. Why? Because she was simply just copying, but not really engaging her brain to think about it. So here's what I told her, and what I'm going to tell you as well, is I said to her, okay, forget copying, take a pause and focus on the key terms or the key information. And that would really prime your brain when you go to revise. The having those key terms would help you to put everything together. And so, for example, when studying properties of ionic compounds, what are the key information? What are the key terms? Well, firstly, giant ionic lattice. Secondly, strong ionic bonds. Thirdly, lots of energy required to break those bonds. So those keywords, giant structure, ionic bonds, energy, these keywords, if you're writing these keywords, these key phrases, these key information when you're making notes rather than everything else, then they are going to serve to prime your brain. So when you come to study, you can then fill in the rest of the pieces of the puzzle, because the key was primary to think about what's the process, what's the concept, and also how am I going to explain this and answer it in my own words. If you're just copying, it's passive revision, right? But what I've explained is the basis of active revision, which we all know now to be one of the best revision methods. So if all you do is copy, then you're not forcing your brain to think, you are instead relying on just relying on your notes or your book. So it helps you to revise actively rather than passively, so you have an effective revision method. So you can see I haven't even gone into revision here in this section. I'm just talking about starting with something as simple as note taking and how that would really help to amplify your revision session, because you're using those keywords, those key terms to fill in the gaps, to force your brain to fill in the gaps. So the key thing here is to note that copying is not thinking. If your notes are just a mirror of your textbook, then you're not training your brain. All right, on to step 3, which is exam questions are a game changer. Now, I don't want you to stop there and think, oh, yes, I've heard a lot about exam questions. What I do want you to think is I want you to think, well, I want you to understand, rather, that the reason you hear time and time and time again about exam questions being important is because even though it is important, students do not do it. So here's the best way I can explain to you why doing exam questions are important. So in a couple of years, you're probably going to go and want to do your driving test, and so that you can pass your driving test to start on the road. Now, when you come to do your driving test, there's something called, there's your theory and there's a practical. And your theory is all about understanding the rules of the road, right? Really understanding the theory. Now, you could spend so much time learning all the theory, learning all the rules of the road, nodding your head along and going, I get it. But until you physically practice your driving on the road, you get on the car and practice it, then you're not going to pass your driving test. It's not even that you're less likely to pass your driving test. You are not going to pass your driving test. Simple, right? Exams are the same thing. You can learn all of the chemistry theory in the world, but you only get tested on one thing, and that one thing is exam technique. So until you start making practicing exam question as part of your revision strategy, not just, rereading your books or anything like that, then you're less likely to reach your potential. I'm not going to say you wouldn't pass, you probably will, but you are less likely to reach your potential. So here's what to do then when it comes to practicing exam questions. After you've reviewed a topic, so after you revise the topic, so going back to step 1, where we looked at, okay, what are the key topics I need to focus on? After you've focused on one of those topics, I want you to attempt a 4 to 6 marker exam question. Why do I say 4 to 6 marker exam question? Because we're aiming for a grade 9 here. If you were aiming for a grade 5, 1, 2, maybe 3 mark questions, but you want to really push yourself to the top. And do that on the timed condition. Again, the timed condition is helping you to practice for the real thing. So if you're going to do a 6 marker question, put your timer on for, identify the 6 marker question, put your timer on for 6 minutes and do that question within 6 minutes. When your alarm clock goes off, your timer goes off, you pause and you stop. Now, as you're going through questions, you want to make sure you're checking for things like command words, right? Is it asking me to describe or explain or evaluate? And therefore, how do I answer the question according to what the examiner is asking? What about mark allocation? So is it 3 2-mark questions, right? And so if it's 2 marks, how much information do I need compared to, if it's like a full 6-mark question? And then you want to use the mark scheme to check your answers, check how marks are allocated, check the key information in the mark scheme. All of these things are going to help you to raise your marks. So really go all in on your exam technique because that's what you'll be tested on. So this is where students improve the fastest when they practice exam technique, not just content recall. Okay, so that's my 3 simple framework, my 3 simple steps to go from a grade 6 to a grade 9. Now, to make sure that you are focusing on the right topics, I've got a video coming up on the screen, top 3 GCSE topics to revise. Click on that on that video and it'll walk you through the topics that most students struggle with and how you can master that by year 11. Okay, that's all for this video. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.